hard to say something new about Doom. It's the most important first-person shooter ever made and set the standard for weapon variety, enemy AI, and 3D level design for years to come. Cool story, bro. We all read the Wikipedia. So what does a late bloomer doomer like me have to add? Well, for starters, the perspective of a recent initiate who lacks the proper nostalgic eyewear that can cloud objectivity. I'm always interested in how games feel to play and how they make us feel as we play. Doom excels at actualizing the exciting promise of its fiction through sound effects, creative art design, and engaging playgrounds to shoot through. For science fiction, I played both Doom 1 and 2 twice on PC on the ultra-violence difficulty, and using my elephantine powers of recall, I count my Hurt Me Plenty playthroughs of both on Xbox One in the summer of 2020 as well, as much of my impressions are identical between all playthroughs.
Groovy!
I use the WASD keys to move, spacebar to activate, and all that good stuff. There's no need to suffer under OG DOS settings.
Treat yourself.
So without further ado, let's get stuck into demolishing demons and sleuthing for secrets as we revisit Doom and Doom 2 to see if this series is indeed as timeless or eternal as they say.
That's 3D.
The best place to start analyzing any classic video game's worth is how it came to be and what differentiated it from its forebears and peers. As we covered in my Catacomb 3 video, the first-person shooter genre officially started with Maze War and Space Sim in the early 1970s. The genre then experienced several major milestones like 1980's Battlezone, 1987's 3D Mini Maze, and in 1991, id Zone Hover Tank 3D, which focused on rendering speed and right-angled walls, and also Catacomb 3D, the first game to feature texture mapping and the player avatar on-screen and in the HUD. The most relevant milestone in regards to Doom's creation would be id's successful 1992 project, Wolfenstein 3D, the grandfather of all modern shooters and one of the first games besides Mortal Kombat to feature such bloody violence. But by the time they'd finished the 6th episode, id was fairly sick of Wolfenstein's simplistic levels. What they weren't sick of was the edgy and violent direction that Wolfenstein had taken them creatively. Id had tasted blood, and they wanted more. Inspired by his D&D campaigns and the movies Aliens and Evil Dead 2, John Carmack pitched the idea of technology versus demons, of science versus the supernatural. The team dug it. Doom's chainsaw and shotgun are clear callbacks to Ash's weapons of choice in Evil Dead 2, and the industrial complexes teeming with acid pools and monster claws certainly evoke the imagery and scares of aliens. So the concept was locked in, but the project needed a name. They soon scrapped the unforgivably silly name Attack of the Attackers and found their Huckleberry and Tom Cruise's Pool Shark character in The Color of Money.
What you got in there?
In here? Doom.
And so the boys got to work impending our Doom. They'd have many challenges, like a Wolfenstein port they still needed to make and that conflicted with Doom's development schedule, and snafus like founding member Tom Hall being fired mid-project as his world-building brain wasn't jiving with the action-first game it was envisioning. His famed Doom Bible was the design document created when the game was still being conceived as a continuous world named Te Tenga, with 4 playable characters and featuring weapons like a knife and machine gun, but also demonic weapons like the Dark Claw and the Unmaker, which would later appear in Doom 64 and Doom Eternal. I'll share a link to the actual Doom Bible in the description because it's pretty interesting and fully available. Suffice to say, while much of his work wasn't used in Doom, the Doom Bible wasn't for naught, as a good portion of it, like the 4 playable characters, would resurface in 1995's Rise of the Triad. So Doom ended up being trimmed back to a Wolfenstein-style shooter in that you had to find keycards to unlock the ways forward and find the exit, and it consisted of 3 major episodes. The final game featured a much simpler story with no cinematics, unlike Hall's detailed vision. Your player character Doomguy's backstory is that he refused a direct order to open fire on civilians and has been sent to a UAC Mars moon base as security detail. The UAC unwittingly opens a portal to hell while experimenting with her dimensional teleporters, and you are the only one left to stop the demonic invasion.
And I say to you, my brothers and sisters, hell is a deep, dark, foul-smelling prison of the damned. And how do you escape this eternal damnation? You blast the nasty pink demons right between their beady little eyes.
Once Doom finally released, though, it would explode and become, just like id had jokingly warned, the quote-unquote #1 cause of decreased productivity in the workplace. Their prediction proved true, as many companies had to ban the game entirely from workplace computers. Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails would jump off stage to go play Doom in his trailer, and Bill Gates even considered buying out id Software himself.
These games are getting really realistic.
Doom came so...
Jeez. Don't interrupt me.
Doom became so pervasive a cultural influence that some not-so-well-meaning U.S. senators even sought to blame it for the Columbine shootings of 1999, citing shooter Eric Harris's frequent playing and modding of the game. It was a stupid argument, but it sounded like it could be right. And after all, Doom was more violent and visceral than any other game before it, and it had captured the imaginations of millions. The question before us today is, how and what did id Software do to make Doom so appealing? Games don't make themselves, and the creative minds behind Doom were bursting with talent. Romero's knack for level design and the big picture, and Carmack's technical prowess spearheaded this dream project, but it's worth noting how much influential talent was baked into id's roster at every level. As we said, designer Tom Hall was removed from the project, but he would do just fine for himself, going on to design 1995's cult hit Rise of the Triad for Apogee 3D Realms. Apogee 3D Realms, and would later co-found Eon Storm with Romero, the studio responsible for the first 2 Deus Ex games and Hall's brainchild Anachronox, all 3 of which I'll cover one day.
Don't you know when?
If industry legend Tom Hall isn't good enough for your company, you can only imagine id was crazy, or they had even more talent in reserve. Fellow id co-founder and Doom concept artist Adrian Carmack previously lent his skills to Commander Keen, Wolfenstein 3D, Hexen, and Quakes 1-3. He's also credited with coining the popular Quake term GIBs, short for giblets. Fellow artist Kevin Cloud followed Romero, Hall, and the Carmacks to id from Softdisk and has worked there ever since, providing art for Doom 2 and 3, Quakes 1-3, acting as a producer for Raven Software's development of my favorite Wolfenstein game in 2009, and executive produced Doom Eternal. American McGee got his start designing levels for Doom's 4th episode, Thy Flesh Consumed, and also worked on Doom 2 and Quakes 1-2 before being unceremoniously fired in 1998 and going on to start his own popular series called American McGee's Alice in 2000. Sandy Peterson created the wildly popular tabletop RPG Call of Cthulhu in 1981 and later joined the Doom team after being impressed by Wolfenstein 3D. He went on to complete 19 levels for Doom and 17 for Doom 2. His Lovecraftian affinity would influence the 7 Quake levels he made, as well as some of the monster designs in that game. Peterson's likely the most unsung member of the old id Software team, as his style should be regarded as the face of Doom because he created so much of what you see and interact with. Long story short though, all of these guys are bursting with creativity and talent. There's one last gentleman we must give homage to, the man who let us hear Doom, Bobby Prince. Similar to how he interwove American standards into Wolfenstein's soundtrack, Prince modeled a good portion of Doom's tunes after 80s metal like Pantera and Slayer. Now, regardless of who wrote what first, though, the zany soundscapes are the pitch-perfect mix of fist-pumping cheese and attitude that makes you feel like you're reenacting a metal album cover.
The metal!
Prince's score serves as a springboard for this power fantasy, but it wouldn't feel so right if the levels it accompanied weren't so fundamentally sound and creatively impressive, especially for their time. Doom's levels embrace several core features: semi-realistic architecture that teases secrets just out of reach, multiple levels of elevation like ramps and stairs, memorable landmarks to aid navigation, and making the player revisit areas to better understand and believe in the 3D space of each level. Wolfenstein 3D sometimes struggled with repetitive design because of its small bag of environmental tricks, often relying on mazes to increase complexity. Doom's levels were much more detailed and structurally interesting. Romero admitted that levels didn't make much architectural sense, but they possessed within their abstract visuals their own internal gaming logic that support fun enemy encounters and copious secret areas. I don't have a ton to say about Doom's levels individually, as few stand out to me except the later Hell levels, but they do work together very well because they so subtly and smoothly transition you from the semi-realistic confines of the UAC bases till you reach Hell. It's a cool little sneak attack from a design perspective and a feature which I think makes it a lot more pleasing to play than Doom 2, which in my opinion got caught up too often in gimmicky level design and never realized its Hell on Earth aesthetic very well. So instead of going level by level, let's just dig into what makes the average Doom level sing. For one thing, unlike Catacomb and Wolfenstein, Doom's secrets weren't just for a score bump at the end of a level, but actually gave you vital resources like ammo, health, and armor, and sometimes even special weapons ahead of when you'd otherwise encounter them. Some secrets were accessed by simple switch flips where you had to backtrack to find out what they just opened, and some environmental puzzles required quick reflexes and critical thinking. Romero and friends tempted the player to search high and low for these secrets like a rat in a maze scouring corners for supplies. And then they'd blindside you with traps and monster closets, punishing you for your curiosity and pushing your reflexes into overdrive. Tim Rogers of Action Button describes this binary push and pull modality well when he describes it as
Search and destroy.
This simple, survivalist gameplay mentality thus allows Doom's most immersive elements to shine even more by contrast. You'll often hear the groans and roars of enemies around corners before you even see them, causes you to tense for the ensuing conflict. Anyone who thinks that Doom 3 just came out of nowhere with its deliberate horror pace and dark lighting needs to revisit the halls of flickering lights in Doom 1, where imps lurk in the corners, or when you tepidly walk down gloomy halls, or when you hear a bear in hell scream as they see you. Tools of the horror genre like shadows and measured pacing weren't common in Doom 1, but they're certainly present, and they're definitely aspects of Doom that's just less emphasized at the series' outset. Doom 1 isn't a game that only tries to horrify you, but it can definitely get a little freaky, and Doom 3 picks up on that. Rant over. Not only was the atmosphere palpable, but the player is constantly being asked to adapt to new terrain and the varied attack patterns of your enemies. Catacomb 3D was mostly just a carpal tunnel syndrome stress test, requiring endless clicking till the monsters crumpled beneath your magic blasts. Wolfenstein's Nazis attack with different speed and damage, but largely required the same twitch shooting to put them down. Doom requires you to continually locate the most advantageous point in a room as you dodge projectiles, avoid enemies both visible and invisible, and make sure you're not being flanked by flying enemies. All the while, you'll need to be switching to the most effective weapon type to match the target you're aiming at. It's famously been said that all the damage in Doom is avoidable, and that's almost completely true. So when you die, you know you likely didn't do your part to avoid your own doom.
What the fuck is that?
And that's almost completely true. There's such a 1-to-1 ratio of input and output, your every action getting predictable and immediate feedback. It's not enough to say that the controls are responsive. There's basically no latency. They're essentially butter and gravy smooth, baby. Most impressively, they make combat and movement satisfying as... oh, don't say it. Even as you operate within one horizontal plane, meaning you always fire straight ahead like a standard 2D game, and you can't jump or look up and down. It had to use some technical trickery to simulate multiple levels of elevation. and to counteract your inability to aim up and down, they added an auto-target system that takes over whenever you get within range of enemies that are above or below you. It can be a little finicky to find this angle, and can go absolutely haywire when firing into a crowd, but you can cheese out some enemies too by shooting from the top of a ledge and having the bullets kind of auto-aim bend down to clear out the path below. Weapons like the plasma rifle, rocket launcher, and BFG have hints of this auto-aim too, and they let you lead your targets so you can strafe dodge, a great boon especially in boss fights. Speaking of guns, Doom's weapon selection and progression structure probably seem familiar, and that's because most modern shooters ape its design. For instance, Half-Life's known for starting you off with a crowbar and then graduating to increasingly strange alien weapons. BioShock lets you monkey around with a wrench before giving you a pistol, shotgun, machine gun, rocket launcher, and more. In Doom, you start with brass knuckles and a pistol, then acquire a chainsaw, shotgun, machine gun like plasma rifle, rocket launcher, and then the BFG is the lore-specific novelty weapon, a progression that games like Turok and Hexen and so many more would later embrace. The pistol and the chain guns share ammo, so you'll likely default to the more powerful weapon of the two that's good for crowd control or stunning particularly tough individual enemies in a pain animation. The brass knuckles look cool, but it's often kind of suicidal to rely on them, so most melee action is by way of your Eager Beaver chainsaw, which stun locks enemies as it chews through them, conserving your ammo and never running out of fuel itself. For tougher problems, look no further than the workhorse weapon, your trusty pimp action shotgun, also known as the Tootsie Toy Dakota Cap Gun from Toys R Us. It's predictably aces in close, and you can also snipe enemies like a rifle with dead-on balls accuracy.
Dead-on balls accurate?
It's an industry term.
So the shotgun in Doom and the super shotgun in Doom 2 solidified the weapon type as a staple of the genre, and will go on to be some of the most well-received weapons of their respective games, like Quake, Blood, Duke Nukem, and many more. The more exotic power weapons include the rocket launcher, plasma gun, and BFG. The rocket launcher is surprisingly fast-firing for an explosive weapon, but watch out. You could blow yourself up because the auto-aim is pulled towards the nearby walls and enemy left or FOV, or a flying enemy has charged you after you shot and is pulling the rocket back towards you. When working properly though, Doom's rocket launcher is great for taking out Barons of Hell or any other meaty fellow like a cacodemon, so use wisely. The last two power weapons, the plasma rifle and the BFG, share ammo. The plasma gun is a high-damage sci-fi machine gun that overheats if fired for too long, but it's the strongest multi-purpose weapon in the game because of its high fire rate and damage that can quickly obliterate crowds, keep up with flying demons, or take out tough enemies in a pinch. The last and most glorious cherry atop this murder cake, though, is the BFG, or the big fucking gun. It looks like you're holding a refrigerator, and it fires a giant green plasma blast that seeks out enemies in a nearby radius and explodes, instantly killing most anything or dealing catastrophic damage. Its long charge time is a bit of a pain, but you can get quite a lot of bang for your buck. Overall, the guns of Doom are still great fun and stack up nicely next to modern gaming's weaponry, but the true genius of their design is how elegantly balanced they are against the demons at the end of your gun barrel. Is there anything more fun or cathartic than slaying demons, especially if they look really cool as they go down? Adrian Carmack killed it with his monster designs here. In-game, we start off simple, fighting humanoids like the zombie men, who are basically just cannon fodder. And then we catch wind of the shotgun guys or former sergeants who carry rocket launchers. Okay, there's no fooling you. They carry shotguns. You got me.
Yo.
These guys are surprisingly troublesome as they can eat through your armor and health quickly, so keep your distance and take them out quickly and firstly. Last but not least of the basic grunt types are the iconic imps, these brown-looking weirdos who throw fireballs at you. They make sure you don't get lazy and just sit in one place and keep you on your toes. They're usually easy enough to dodge, but large numbers and in concert with greater demons, they can become a much bigger problem. I've always really liked their sprites, and considering how well implemented they are in Doom 3, the imps have always been a general Doom favorite of mine. The next subset of demons are the pinky demons and the specters. Pinkies are this tank-style enemy who like to chomp you in close, and the specters are just invisible versions of the pinkies. Both species are pretty straightforward to kill as they have no projectile attack and can be stun-locked with a chainsaw, but just don't let them catch you in a corner because they will eat up your health very quickly. The last non-boss demon category is easily the most obnoxious, the flying demons. You'll first encounter the iconic cacodemons, these grinning globe-like assholes who can take a beating, chomp you in close, or fire highly damaging projectiles. Out of all the non-boss types, these are regularly some of the most challenging for me, as they're highly mobile and very durable while distracting you from ground troops. But most people reserve their hate for the Lost Souls, these Ghost Rider-style flaming skulls who charge you quickly for high melee damage. And like the Pinky Demon, if they get you in a corner, they will obliterate you. They also have a habit of spawning in weird places, and since they can fly, they can often sneak up on you for cheap damage. Alright, so we've arrived at the boss monster category. Now, because Doom reuses these so often throughout the series, and because, well, it's kind of been out for like 30 years, hope I'm not spoiling this for anybody. But the first boss, or bosses, are Twin Barons of Hell, whom I'm told are not just wearing stylish trousers, but have fawn-like hairy legs and hooves. Yeah, I'm not convinced either. Those are absolutely hell bottoms, if I've ever seen them. They have a blood-curdling cry when they see the player, and more than once or twice that really freaked me out. They're tough as nails and have absolutely devastating green energy blasts, so keep these guys at a distance and wail on them with everything you've got. Next on the docket is the Cyber Demon, whose first appearance is in a big arena with tons of ammo, but as the series wore on, it'd love to cram them more and more into cramped areas and told the player to just suck it up. This guy's as big as a house and has a super fast-firing rocket launcher for an arm that can kill in one hit. This guy definitely feels the most like the personification of the sci-fi and supernatural aesthetic that Carmack and id were first going for when they pitched Doom. And so does the last Doom 1 creature I'll feature, the Spider Mastermind. He's not terribly fun to fight as he hit-scans you with a chain gun, but he looks and sounds awesome with his awful little face, his bulbous exposed brain, and his rattle and clank robot legs churning as he catches up with you. And once he starts getting remixed into levels in later Doom games with more open areas, he's a lot more fun to fight. Definitely one of my favorites. Now, compared to Doom 2, Doom 1's enemy roster is fairly straightforward, but simple isn't bad, if simple is good. When you get into arenas where you've got imp fireballs whizzing past you while pinkies rush you, and cacodemons are dive-bombing you and pushing you into other enemies, it's glorious chaos. And you definitely won't be sitting there thinking, man, this is just a couple melee AIs combined with one or two flyers. That's basic game design, bro. And in addition to how wonderfully demons complement each other's strengths and make you switch weapons and tactics on the fly, they have a ton of personality in how they animate and sound, too. They can be tricked into fighting each other, which is always entertaining. And it's the cute little game of chicken to draw one's fire and run across the path of another one to see if they hit each other and divert attention away from you. Other cool features that id added were explosive barrels that you could shoot to jib enemies nearby. It also included armor as a mechanic to buff your health, and included several power-ups that grant invisibility, invincibility, and night vision that are sparingly added to the maps to help you out. It's like, saves and design mainstays for the rest of the industry, guys. Jeez. Now, it sounds like a lot, but all of these are fairly sparse save for the barrels, which show up pretty often, and I don't think anyone's sad they got to blow up a demon with a toxic waste vat. It's just really fun. Now, once you've gotten comfortable with your weapons and learned the enemy behaviors, you might have had your socks rocked off by the fourth and final official episode of Doom in 1995 called Thy Flesh Consumed. Doom is still probably the easiest old school shooter out there, all things considered, and that's okay because that usually means it's always fun and rarely frustrating, and it's also a testament to how fair and complementary the design elements were. But Thy Flesh Consumed aimed to really challenge the player, especially the seasoned Doom player. The first two missions are very, very difficult compared to Doom 1. E1M1, or Hell Beneath, has low ammo counts, cramped quarters, narrow walkways with toxic pitfalls, and that's just the start. You'll also get to experience an incredibly unfair instance of Doom letting enemies shoot through walls in not one but two different places in the level. That would be good cover otherwise, so fuck whoever left this code in, by the way. I'm not bitter. You're bitter. The second map, Perfect Hatred, starts off incredibly intense and relents very little over the course of its runtime. If you survive the shotgunners and cacodemons at the start, you'll have to master the auto jump across the gaps and not fall into the lava below. And then you'll have to time your run again to get up to the next levels and then face off against not 1 or 2 Barons of Hell, but as many as 4 if playing on Ultra Violence, with about 1 lane of highway to dodge them. And then you have to dodge all the projectiles while navigating a perilous walkway, then have to dodge a cyber demon, which you can thankfully cheese out, but it can be pretty intimidating the first time you get to the top of that ramp and realize you've gone from the frying pan into the fire. It's just hateful, as the name implies, and while I can't say I love playing the map, I definitely respect its sheer disdain for the player's comfort level. And once you complete it, you may find a full beard on your chest, so there's that to look forward to.
You are hairy like animal.
Good, baby. Very good.
E4M6, or Against the Wickedly, is another Romero special, and is a really jam-packed map that has a 4-sided pillar in its center, each side having a small lift that teleports you to a different area once you get to the top of the lift. The tough part is all 4 directions are wide open to enemy fire as you're ascending the lift. Not to mention you also have a finite number of radiation suits on the ground to prevent damage while you're dropping down to the toxic waste to go around to the next lift again. This is not only one of the hardest maps in Doom, but it's probably one of the best. It requires constant engagement from your reflexes, but also your ability to comprehend and plan out where to go and why you're going there. Overall, this episode dips pretty high and low in terms of fun factor, save for the 2 episodes I just mentioned. Much of it is fairly tedious to get through, and some of the best parts are those hard parts that just kind of have to hit just right or they can turn you off. But it's definitely the work of people who knew their way around a map editor and reflected some of the high concept design that Doom 2 had employed. And even the roughest parts of Doom are usually still pretty fun to play because its core foundation is so strong. The game looked nuts for the time, and it's still pretty attractive today because it frequently mixes up the textures and environmental themes. It got secret hunting right. It's not enough to just press suspicious looking wall hangings till one gives way. It's way more fun to understand the 3D space of the level to find where hideaways could exist, and then use your imagination to find the trick or the gimmick that will lead you to that spot. And the combat, with the still great sound effects and music and requiring speed, chess-like reflexes and decision making to avoid being cornered, while also performing proper triage for the enemy configurations and space you're presented with, is endlessly entertaining. Even in 1993, Doom was criticized as being repetitive and one-dimensional, but Doom makes solving the puzzle of each room's geometry and enemy count a regularly engaging, fair, and satisfying feat to pull off over and again. And the more you pull it off, the more you'll feel like you are the last man standing against supernatural evil, with nothing but willpower and weaponry at your disposal, a futuristic St. George against the dragon. But Doom's flavor isn't just guns and tech instead of swords and sorceries, RPGs, and tales of old. Doom is its own trend, a careful cocktail of schlocky B-movie horror, heavy metal attitude, and palpable atmosphere. That's Doom to me, probably the most well-aged game I've ever played. And that brings us to Doom 2, Hell on Earth, a game that I never enjoy quite as much as I think I will. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the biggest Doom 2 fan that ever lived.
What? No.
I'm not saying I'd kick it out of bed, but I'm not inclined to make it breakfast in the morning. Navigating its corkscrew levels and obnoxious enemy dogpiles definitely tires me out, and not in a fun way, like your mom does.
Oh, come on!
Compared to the tight design of the first game, Doom 2's moreness often feels indulgent and self-aware, but there's greatness here too in the changes that id made to the formula, however slight. The most fundamental change is the addition of the only new weapon in Doom 2, the now legendary Super Shotgun. This beauty is a double-barreled buck stick like no other. It annihilates imps and zombie soldiers, often taking out multiples with its spread, and can lay an absolute smackdown everything up to Barons of Hell. If there's anything that keeps me coming back to Doom 2, it's the power rush of the Super Shotgun. It's just way too fun. Some complain it breaks the weapon balance of the game, but because Doom 2 is significantly more challenging than the first, I'd say we needed an equalizer. Why so much harder, Doom 2? Well, look no further than the disgusting bastards that Ed dreamed up this go-around. Let's start with the ones most similar to Doom 1's, the Hell Knight and the Arachnotron. Hell Knights are slightly weaker reskins of the Barons of Hell, and they often show up in pairs or alongside a horde of weaker foes. Arachnotrons are smaller spider masterminds that pelt you with fast, high-damage energy blasts instead of hit-scanning chain guns like the Mastermind does. Dodging these is pretty tough, so go ahead and whip out your high DPS weapons like your plasma rifle to go ahead and clear these guys out quickly. Oh, and speaking of chain guns, that brings us to Doom 2's most infamous jerks, the heavy weapon dudes. These shitbirds hit scan you with dual chain guns and are often placed far away so they can pick you up before you can even get close. And that's when they're not popping out of monster closets behind you to mow you down in about 2 seconds. I take extra amounts of pride in shotgunning them to bits before they even hit me once. So that makes me feel so much better. Alright, well now we get into my favorite two new enemies, the Revenant and the Mancubus, the most creative of the bunch. Revenants are armored skeletons with shoulder-mounted homing missiles that can only be dodged if you change direction quickly or outdistance their trajectory. What's great about these guys is they animate like creepy, jittery, old black and white Disney animation. I love that. Next up is the Mancubus, a great big cybernetic Jabba the Hutt looking guy with blaster cannons for arms, and they aren't nearly as formidable as I remember them being, but they're still pretty cool looking and fun to fight. They have this pretty cool gurgle sound effect too. Alright, well we've made it to the undisputed bastard class of Doom's two demons, which includes the Archvile and a Cacodemon variant called the Pain Elemental. Pain Elementals throw out lost souls intermittently, and when they die, they expel several more. Quite the pain, although I do like their expressive facial sprite quite a bit. The Archvile, on the other hand, can go play a NASCAR traffic. His primary attack is a homing blast that comes up through the floor and just about one-shots you every time. The only way to break up the animation is to break his line of sight. If that wasn't enough, this SOB resurrects any nearby demons you've already killed, so you have to take the Archvile out first while avoiding all the rest. This guy is quite challenging and can sometimes even take several BFG shots to take down. Doom 2 plays for keeps. Enemy counts are much higher and the super shotgun spread, killing multiple enemies at a time, feels completely necessary, as there's often no other way to avoid being surrounded. But if Doom 2's fairly punishing combat doesn't deter you, but instead enlivens you, you'll still have to deal with some of the most tedious level designs of any 90s classic.
Oh, fuck! No.
It's no secret that Romero didn't work that much on Doom proper after the first episode, preferring instead to be the voice of the company at public events, the hype man, but also the rock star. No one else wanted to do it, so it made logistical sense, but the project definitely could have used his knack for levels that educated the player in mechanics, but were also crafted primarily for enjoyment. Sandy Peterson and American McGee are gifted minds, mind you, but they still have a different approach than Romero. Romero was about the fun above all else, and Peterson was prone to healthy experimentation, sometimes to a fault.
So if you hate barrels of fun, kind of Doom E1 M8 was my fault.
I actually like quite a few of Sandy's levels in Doom 1, especially exceptional levels like Mount Erebus, which, while quite large, have many distinct landmarks and pique the curiosity of the player to search out the way forward. Even levels like Unholy Cathedral, that fans regularly savage, aren't bad, they're just a little into winding geography and confusing teleporter puzzles that would signal what design style Sandy would soon gravitate more fully towards. Downtown is the greatest example of this new philosophy. As an abstract cityscape, it's the first and really only map to intentionally resemble Hell on Earth, but it's also unfortunately ugly as shit and lacks any real landmarks. Its layout is so contrived that Sandy felt the need to put a huge arrow pointing to the first major point of interest, and that's about all the help you're going to get in this very long and drawn-out level. Another annoying feature is that while trying to figure out where to go, enemies way up high are pelting you with projectiles, and it's just more tedious busy work to try and get the right angle or distance to let the auto-aim make short work of them up in their tiny little cage rooms. The fun continues even further with humdingers like the Industrial Zone map, which features tall, ugly buildings surrounded by toxic moats that require you to engage in inconsistent platforming to get around. It's not a very intuitive map, nor does it compel you forward with any cool sights or combat encounters. Catacombs is also Mira McGee's last map, and one I wish had stayed snug in his mind's eye. Aside from one of the coolest walls in Doom, it's just so annoying to fight through the chain gunners and revenants while using the sliver of floor beneath you to keep out of the toxic goop below. And on we go, through some generally okay maps like Suburbs or the Courtyard, but bracketed by so many maps that seem preoccupied with being as different from Doom 1 as possible. And then there are the gimmick levels. You can sell me on a gimmick if it's just well realized. Dead Simple's a great map because it's easy to comprehend and fun to use all the various pieces of cover to fend off a really tough mix of enemies. It's a tight, concise delivery of concept, a fun experience for the player. Many other Doom 2 levels feel like a flirtatious kerchief that once dropped expects the player to metaphorically pick it up and come the rest of the way in pursuit of the idea. The Chasm features then walkways that are easy to fall off of or be knocked off of by the hordes of lost souls and cacodemons. And to add a bit of cheeky punctuation to it all, you'll find this hilariously pointless invincibility power-up at the bottom of this shaft that doesn't even last as long as the ride up to the top. Also, there are no enemies in sight. Okay. Barrels of Fun opens with several hallways filled with explosive barrels, and you must dodge through them without any blowing up or the chain reaction will kill you. It sucks.
So if you hate Barrels of Fun, kind of Doom E1 M8 was my fault.
However, the rest of the level has some of the most classic Doom 2 levels to me, with this huge fight along this theater seating kind of room. It's not super smooth to play per se, but the spectacle is pretty cool. Overall, I appreciate the hustle and the bravery to think outside of the box and to try and really push the sequel to one of the biggest games ever made to, the zenith of design. But there's a reason that Peterson's known for his fiendish level design. He's a bit of a troll who likes complexity for its own sake. And the more of these levels pile up, Doom 2 becomes kind of a grind to get through, which is too bad, because there are some great levels waiting for you on the other side. One of my favorites is Gotcha, simply because you get a front row seat to a great set-piece fight between a cyber demon and a spider mastermind, and you have to kill the winner. Nirvana's sort of a pain to teleport through, but the last area with all these little islands full of demons is a really memorable and hectic fight. Bloodfalls just looks great, and it's a decent gameplay experience. The Spirit World is generally a very satisfying and distinct hell level with some of the coolest fights and visuals in the whole series. Just take a look at the Spider Mastermind and Arachnotron horde in this lava. It's super cool. And my favorite Doom 2 map is Monster Condo, a non-stop fight against hordes of different high-level demon combinations. It almost feels like a boss rush, and has some of the most unique and gruesome assets in Doom 2, between the shifting walls of the library where you're solving puzzles and these strange arena-style areas with dead bodies hanging from the ceilings. Really creepy. So overall, Doom 2 doesn't always land for me, as I think Peterson gets carried away in several places, but it's certainly a game that has some strong ideas and a passion for strange ones. Doom's combat is in many ways improved here because of the excellence of the super shotgun and the added layers of strategy you must learn to beat the tough new enemies like the Revenant and the Archvile. My enjoyment wanes quite a bit though when the maps become consumed by a gimmick or the tedium of key hunting or finding the hidden way forward. But hey, every classic has something it could have done better, and Doom 2 is still solid and aims high. Well friends, that's my Doom 1 and Doom 2 impressions. Doom 1 is still a great game, and one I remember liking even before I really dug into retro PC games back when I only played on console. It's aged better than probably any other game I've ever played, and that's a testament to the aptitude of its designers, who knew how to make the player learn and immerse themselves in the space, and then be asked to take that spatial awareness further as they dodge strafe around demon hordes. Doom 2's Super Shotgun is legendary for its power and fun level, and while the game's level designs tend to be rather hit or miss, it's still a big deal when it came out and has aged well enough for me. Now, because it's Doom we're talking about today, we don't even have to stop the video here. We could keep going with Sigil, the brutal plutonium experiment, the underrated TNT evolution, Brutal Doom, or the 50,000 other mods out there. More games have been made in Doom's engine and engine branch-offs like GZ Doom than probably any other engine out there. Doom didn't just set the standard for what made a level interesting and fun to explore, nor did it just create a genius combat ecosystem. It created a foundation for the next generation of designers to ply their trade and follow their dreams. John Carmack is legendary for making pretty much all of his tips and tricks and engines open source for the public for free.
They can just go do it, which is a wonderful thing.
More generally, Doom represents what makes gaming fun at its core: a great gameplay loop, music that pumps you up, and the sense of taking you to an imaginative new world. I'm not qualified enough in other genres like your Marios and Zeldas and all that to say that Doom is the most important or the best game ever made, just because it solidified the building blocks of the first-person shooter that we still use today. But I can safely say that Doom probably had the most good things for the first time in one place as we've ever seen in video game form. And that's why it will probably always be the most impressive for its time to me. Next, we'll be looking at all the Doom clones, Doom inspired, who sought to expand on all the milestones that it had accomplished, and we'll even take a look at some of Doom's contemporaries that its success completely overshadowed. So until then, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.